Riz, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, you run a site called Unite Asia, and at first glance, I thought that Unite Asia could have been like a college or a university related group, but you're actually looking to unite Asians for a very different reason. Can you tell us what Unite Asia is and the catalyst for your site?
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for giving me this time. I mean, it's pretty amazing that you're sitting in the States and you're interested in what's going on out here in Asia. I mean, that's pretty much what the catalyst for Unite Asia, the website, is all about. I grew up in Hong Kong. I'm a very much I was a metalhead. Then I got into punk rock. Then I got into hardcore. And my entire life has been about consuming music, just consuming everything about it, like the information. Like I need to know what band members are in what band and what are they started. So like my whole life has always been about like wake up in the morning, get myself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and then go and scour music websites as my way to get started with the day, and then I go off to work.
Mhm.
So after like a number of years, I don't know how many years of me just like every single day going through all the typical ones, like Punk News, Metal Sucks, Metal Injection, all these great websites. I'm like, why don't I ever find out about bands from like down the street, like in Kuala Lumpur or Singapore or in Taiwan, like all these bands that I'm really good friends with because I've been playing in bands in Asia for over 20 years now. And like I would never get that information from these websites. And then finally at some point I was like, you know what? This is the punk rock in me, the DIY guy in me, which is like, you know what? Fuck it. Let me just start my own. And that's honestly the catalyst. It was 5 years ago. It started with my own selfish desires of wanting to get all this information. And like through all my contacts, I would go through my social media. I'm like, how come no one knows about this band or this band or this band? And I'm like, let me just put all of this information, gather all of it in one place, and then unite Asia. Imagine how successful this thing is. It honestly is the most successful thing I've done.
And so you've been a passionate about music for all of your life. One of the great things about music and art is how art can be contextualized for different countries and different cultures. And like you said, you've read all these publications, but you haven't sort of been able to find out more news and information about the bands that you actually follow, the ones that are in Asia. And what punk means to Americans could mean something completely different to someone living in a different country. For you, what is the ethos behind hardcore and punk, and why are you so passionate about the scene over in Asia?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if I'm looking back at my own history, because I'm 43, I'm not a young man. I've been into this for quite some time. But for me personally, it all started because it was an escape. It was an escape from this identity crisis that I had, because a lot of people who might be looking at this are like, wait, this dude does not look like he's from Hong Kong, nor does he sound like he's from Hong Kong. But I am. This is where I've lived my entire life. I am of Pakistani descent. Like my parents are Pakistani. They moved to Hong Kong many years before I was born. I was born in Karachi, but I was 2 months old when I was growing up in Hong Kong, when they brought me to Hong Kong. So I'm living very traditional Muslim Pakistani household at home. Then I go off to live in Hong Kong, which is a very Chinese society, Cantonese speaking. A lot of people are like, oh, well, Hong Kong is so international. I'm like, man, out of certain pockets, you have to know how to speak Chinese, or you're not going to be able to function. But then I went to an international school, which was an American school. So I had this just complete identity crisis when I was growing up. And my only escape, because my parents didn't understand the language I was using or the accent that I was using or the things I was picking up at school. The school didn't understand why my parents would send me with this random food in my containers, like curry mixes and stuff like that. So it's just like I was sitting there in the middle as like a 5 or 6-year-old going like, what? Why is this so difficult? And like, and so eventually what happened was metal. Like that's how I got into metal. Like there's something about the loud guitars and like the loud drumming slamming in my ear, my headphones, that just gave me that escape. And then once I started getting into metal, it was mainly always about the guitar and the drums. I couldn't care less about the vocals or the lyrics. I'm like, it's all like fantastical, like fantasy, dreamland, like South of Heaven, satanic stuff. I'm like, I didn't care. And then it was bands like Sick of It All and Bad Religion were the two bands where suddenly the lyrics were about everyday life. about the racism that I was dealing with, about all the classism, because we were, as South Asians in a lot of countries around Asia, especially in like Chinese societies, we're pretty much the bottom of the rung, man. We're at the very bottom of the ladder. So suddenly this music was speaking to me, and I was like, what? I didn't know you could have amazing music and lyrics that meant and reflected the life that I was living. So with that, like all I started doing in about 99, I started a band called King LLAG. And what I took was all that DIY ethos, like the idea that you can make things happen. You never have to wait for a record label. You don't have to wait for a manager. You don't have to wait for anything. You go get it done. Like if you have a band, get a band going, right? If you want to put on a show, you go do it. So like I remember hunting down like bars and restaurants in Hong Kong, and I was just like trying to find places to put on shows and stuff like that. So it's that ethos, the idea of that you can make things happen in the way you want to make it happen. It's not about a style of music. It's a mentality. It's this mentality that there's a community out there that you can create of like-minded people who are also about getting things done on their own.
So you said that you started this in the late 90s, and you had mentioned that Kim LLAG was sort of considered the godfather of Chinese hardcore. Why did you start the band, and why do fans consider Kim LLAG so influential?
Yeah. Well, what happened was like I grew up in Hong Kong, and then I went off to college at UMass Amherst, actually, Massachusetts, from 94 to 98. And like in terms of like where I got that punk rock ideology instilled was from going to the States and living amongst punk kids and seeing it all like firsthand. I couldn't believe that people were releasing their own music. And, back then it was all cassettes. So, you would go record it, put it out on a cassette. You would do your own flyer work, like cutting things out and stuff like that. And it was just so foreign to me from coming from Hong Kong. Like many people in Hong Kong, people here think magazines or zines have to be like glossy paper and color. They don't think back to like the cost of putting that stuff out. So what I did was like when I got all that punk rock ideology instilled in me that you can get this, you can make this happen. I came back to Hong Kong after living in the States for 4.5 years or 5 years. Came back to Hong Kong thinking, all right, I'm back home. Let me see where punk rock is now. Let me see what hardcore is now. And I remember going to a show with a friend of mine who was like, oh, yeah, no, man, you've been away for a while. There are hardcore bands in Hong Kong. I'm like, dope, show me the hardcore bands, dude. Go up, and there's a band on stage with dreads and a DJ covering Limp Bizkit and Korn and stuff like that. I was like, oh, shit, wow. Are you serious? Like, it was one of those things where there was like I started wondering, I'm like, where is the divide here? How come it was 99? You know what I mean? It was like we still had access to things. I was like, why is it that it seems so confused here? And within a couple months of just kind of like trying to figure this out, I was like, language. There's a language issue here where Hong Kong, as international as it is, its main mother language is still Cantonese, man. Mm-hmm. This is a very proud Cantonese speaking city. Thank God it is, because that's why Cantonese is still alive and well, because of a city like Hong Kong. So what happened was I was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my own band and my own zine where all the articles are in both English and Cantonese.
Wow.
And because it seems like we need to start all of this all over again, and kind of like counter like the misinformation that local magazines in Hong Kong were putting out there, my zine was called Start From Scratch. So in Cantonese, it was called Yao Ling Oshi. Let me start from zero. And so with that, I had a zine, and I'm like, well, the zine, you've got to be able to see the band, listen to it, just gonna be like, it sounds like it's just noisy. It's just all punk, three chords. You know what I mean? But like when you see punk rock, you see hardcore, you're like, I see the impact now. And so I started King LLAG, and so that's where. In 99, that was the catalyst for those two items, was that zine, and King LLAG was to kind of just give this rebirth and re-understanding of what hardcore is in a language that's accessible to local people. And that's kind of the reason why we got that whole Godfather tag.